So a few years back, I was speaking at an event, and I was told that there was this guy in the audience. And, I've had some really exciting times speaking in front of some fun people. Telling jokes in front of Dick Van Dyke was one of my favorite things ever. But anyway, I heard this guy was there, and, he's one of all-time world-renowned speakers, and he was head of this Up with People organization, the youngest CEO ever. He's there in the audience, and he was a New York Times, Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and he had written this book on It's Not Just Who You Know, and everybody knew about that book at the time. And so I have to give this talk. Now, after the talk, here's what happened. He comes up to me and he talks to me. Now, let me tell you why that is so typical of this guy to do that, because the subtitle of the book that I knew him from was Transforming Your Life and Organization by Turning Colleagues and Your Contacts into Lasting, Genuine Relationships. So here he was developing a relationship. We still have that relationship. He was true to form in the book, and the person I'm talking about now is on with me. His name is Tommy Spaulding. Tommy, it is a thrill to have you on this little chat time. Thank you for joining me here.
You bet, Steve. An honor.
Well, Tommy has one of the coolest things. He has this Global Youth Leadership Academy, and he speaks and takes these kids all over and takes them to really the next level. And I love that. I love that he speaks to all these corporations and things like that. But one of the things that a lot of people don't know about him is he really cares about people. And these people that he influences, he wanted to do something for them to help improve their relationships. And that's where we connected again in Arizona, and I came out and spoke to this gathering of these couples. And the latest book is entitled The Heart-Led Leader. And Tommy, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here, during this time of crisis, epidemic, pandemic, whatever you'd call it, a lot of people have lost heart. And I was wondering, maybe we could just start by you, the person who wrote The Heart-Led Leader. Well, what does a person do when they've lost heart? What's the first step, or how could you encourage them?
Well, it's normal, Steve, to lose heart, and when you're losing your job, or you're furloughing people, or laying off people, or reducing your income and your expenses, and your wife is home, or maybe your husband's home and homeschooling the kids, and
yeah,
they're driving. So, I mean, everything. It's a tough time. It's easy to lose hope, but this is when we need to get closer to God, and this is when we need to really rely on our friends and our family, and this is when we need to have hope that tomorrow is going to get better, and we need heart-led leaders to lead us through this tough time more than ever.
Yeah, I think just looking at the bottom line or whatever, and not approaching this from the heart, you really do miss people. And one of the things that we've talked about is that everybody is going through some kind of loss, or I would have to say just about everybody, whether it's routine or expectation, but some really tough loss. But here's one of the things that I wanted to ask you about. Some people had this facade, and what they were personally was nothing like the persona or what people saw out there. And then this thing hits. Maybe all of this belief in their financial strength and stability went away because they lost everything, or they lost their restaurant or their company or whatever. But there are people, the biggest loss for them, it isn't a loved one or whatever, but they lost face. And people now know you're not who you thought you were. What do you say to that person who's just about as down and out as they can be because they've kind of shattered the image that they had?
Sure. And what they need to know is we're all in this together. Yeah. And what this coronavirus has done it's leveled the playing field with humility for all of us. I mean, as a New York Times best-selling author with hundreds of speeches booked and, you know, an incredible, successful speaking business, every one of my speeches, Steve, hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue gone. And so everybody's affected by it. Everyone has a story. Yeah. And I believe that this coronavirus, at the end of the day, the greatest silver lining through this coronavirus is this. As an organization, as an individual, as a family, as a husband, wife, parent, as every single human being on this planet, you cannot go through this pandemic, this epidemic, this coronavirus, whether it's 2, 3, 4 months long. No one will go through it and come out the same. Nobody. It's impossible to come out the same. You will either come out of this better individually or organizationally, better or worse. You won't be the same. And the choice is ours. And it starts and ends with faith and hope in ourselves and tomorrow. And I hope that my family and I come out of it better. I think we are. Organizationally, I hope we do. And I hope everyone listening on this show that they choose to come out better through this pandemic.
Yeah. So over your career, and I hear how this has really affected you. I hadn't really thought about that, but yes, it must be really tough, and you're raring to go again. But over your career, you've seen folks lose everything, and that certainly is the case here. What do you say to somebody who looks at their life and says, man, I've lost everything through this? What is something that would be helpful for them in literally starting over?
Yeah. If I was to interview, if I was to interview every single successful person on this planet, every single person that has an incredible marriage, every single person that truly has joy and happiness in their personal and professional lives, if you interviewed everyone, you know what they all have in common, besides maybe having a faith in God, is that they all had loss. They all had failure. They've all lost it. You know, some of my greatest friends that have the best marriages had terrible divorces before. Some of my most successful business leaders that are running unbelievable organizations bankrupt before. You know, the journey of success, you will have failure. And sometimes failure humbles us, and sometimes failure brings us closer to God, and sometimes failure helps us get to the next level of success. So my advice to people that are down and out, my advice to people that are really struggling through this coronavirus is this is the step towards tomorrow's success for you.
Well, I really believe that, and I think, you know, you can't go from nothing to rebuild into something if you isolate, if you keep yourself from, you know, even though maybe you're humiliated over your loss or whatever, but you go out there and you continue to connect with folks. I mean, that is the way back, is connection. And in, you know, book number 1 for you, you know, you're really talking about how to turn these folks that maybe you meet or it's a colleague, whatever, and you're saying, let's turn these folks into a genuine relationship, and that's the way to succeed. And if you've lost everything, I think that's really important. What is one of the key means to create the genuine relationship versus, oh yeah, that's somebody I know, or yeah, I met that person one day?
Yeah. I mean, many of us have relationships, whether they're personal or professional, that are transactional. You know, I do something for you, Steve, and then you have to do something for me. I don't want those relationships.
No.
I want relationships where I serve and love others. I think one of the things that we can do through this pandemic is really invest in our relationships. And here's a great exercise, especially if you're going through a tough time or you're down in the dumps because you've lost your job or your business is in the tank. Every morning when you wake up, get a piece of paper out and write down the names of 10 friends, 10 colleagues, 10 teammates, 10 customers, clients, neighbors, relatives, just 10 people that are on your heart that you want nothing from, but that you're thinking of them through this coronavirus. And then throughout the day, call all 10 of those people up and say, basically, I want nothing from you. I just want to check in with you and hear your story and how you're doing. And you're going to learn what's going on in their lives. And if you spend your day doing that, and that one day turns into 2 days, turns into a week and a month, and every day you're reaching out to people and asking yourself, how could I bless them? How could I serve them? How could I listen to them? And you turn your life into helping and serving others. I call this whole thing, by the way, Steve, net giving. This world is brainwashed that networking is what we need to do. We go out and meet people. Networking is the most selfish act of all kind because it's meeting people to help who? Help ourselves. And so why don't you have a net giving philosophy where you're meeting people, calling people, reaching out to people to give and serve to them. If you start doing those little steps, you'll start building authentic relationships and getting all the, the bull transactional fake relationships out of your life. And that's what we want to do, is to have more sincere, genuine relationships.
I tell you, I love that. And it rings true to me. I met a guy several years ago, and he was really at the kind of the top of what you'd say, top of his game. He was just had this amazing job with this foundation and all. And he called me up, and this would be now 5 years later, and we talked, visit, and all that. And I asked him, what have you been doing? And he lost his job about 6 months after he was at the top when I knew him, and he hadn't been employed since. So as we talked, I said, it seems like to me that now that your resume has 4.5 years of unemployment on it, just going to Starbucks every day, which he said he was doing, and sending out your resume to people is never going to get you a job because, Tommy, don't you think, most people look at that gap, they go, wow, what is that? And if it wasn't a terminal illness that you recovered from, you're probably not going to get that job. So I said, why don't you get up and one of his boys had said he was he was just a lazy bum. So why don't you get up and put on a suit and tie and come in here? I've got an empty office. You take this office. And I said, why don't you sit down and make some phone calls until you find an organization where you could go and volunteer or, just give your time and work. And then you become so valuable to them that they say, we ought to hire this guy. Well, you get in a mindset so long, nobody's suggestion is good enough. And of course, he didn't do it. But I just think if a person didn't have a job, if they said, I'm going to call 10 people today, see what I could do for them, man, your chances of being employed sooner than later probably go up by 5,000% with that kind of phone call. I really believe in that. I love that advice. Now, in the second book, you talk about the heart-led leader. Okay, so if I'm going to get back up, if the virus has really knocked me down, how do I become a heart-led leader from a virus-destroyed, unemployed, or feeling like a failure kind of person? How do I do that?
Well, no matter if you feel like a failure or feel like $1 million, everyone wakes up in the morning, and we have a choice to make every morning. It's a leadership choice. Yeah. I believe that there's 2 types of mothers, 2 types of parents, fathers, 2 types of executives, 2 types of authors, 2 types of teachers, doctors. Whatever you do in life, there's 2 types of people. There are servant leaders, those that serve others before themselves. And then there's then there's self-serving leaders, which are people that serve themselves first and then others. So you have a choice every morning to wake up to be a heart-led servant leader, to lead and serve others first, or to serve yourself first. And no one wakes up ever saying, Steve, I cannot wait to wake up this morning and be a self-serving leader. No one chooses to be that. But the reality is, factually, nearly 90% of the world are self-serving leaders. To be a true servant leader, to wake up and truly serve others before yourself is really hard. But I've dedicated my life to researching and studying and learning about, what makes a heart-led leader. And when you meet a heart-led leader and you're around that person, you want to become like that person. And there's nothing like, giving your life to serving other people. And the reality is, if you live that way, you're going to be incredibly successful financially. You're going to be incredibly successful with joy and happiness and purpose and service. But it just takes a choice. But we wake up in the morning, we turn on our laptops, we turn on our email, we turn on the news. And we're already in defense. We're already in, texting and emailing and, just 1,000 miles an hour on the treadmill, on the hamster wheel. And we forget to make those 10 phone calls a day. We forget to invest in the lives of others. We forget to invest in the lives of others. And it's just a choice we have to make every day.
Well, Tommy, I was fortunate enough to have a father that taught me that success wasn't how much you could accumulate, because there are a lot of people that are either they inherit it or they accumulate it, and they have this sense of emptiness. And my dad said, whatever level of success you have, if you feel fulfilled, not necessarily satisfied, but you feel fulfilled and you're still motivated and all, then that's really success. But if you have all the money in the world, but you're not fulfilled by that, and you're empty and lonely and isolated and full of shame and all of that, not success. And I love the fact that you've really pointed people toward the heart, toward serving others, because that's how, I just somehow got addicted to helping people. And once you get addicted to something like that, you just want to do it more and more. And it's almost like you can't even claim it as a virtue, because once you start doing it, you really get the feel of how rewarding that is. As we finish up, anything else you want to share, any insights you have or encouragements for people having a rough time during all of this?
Yeah. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. And we're all in this together. Everybody has a story. We just found out my wife's mother was in the nursing home, and she got the coronavirus, and now she's in the hospital.
Oh, dear.
And she might, die alone. We all have our story,
Yeah.
Every person going to this planet is going through something. And so whatever you're going through, know that this too shall pass, that you'll get through this. We'll get through this as a country, as a world, and as a neighbor. We just have to keep praying, believing in God, keep giving it to others every day, and make a choice that, through this tough time, I can wallow in my pity and live in fear, live with anxiety, or I could wake up every morning, go for a walk, praise God, serve other people, volunteer, call 10 people and ask them how they're doing. And when you hear their story, it might humble you that maybe other people have a harder story than yourself, and it humbles us all. We'll get through this, Steve. It's been an honor to be on your show.
Well, I sure am glad we got to talk, Tommy, and I just want to encourage anybody who is discouraged, no matter what you're leading, whether it's your family, a committee, maybe it's just you're leading a Sunday school class. Tommy's got a great book, The Heart-Led Leader, and I encourage you to get it. And Tommy, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, contact you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, it's Tommy Spaulding, S as in Sam, P as in Paul, AULDING.com. And if I could just say goodbye, Steve, my wife and I, we just always want to go on a marriage retreat, once a year or every other year. It's just been part of our repertoire since we've been married. And I'm just not a fan of them, not because I don't want to learn, but usually the person running the marriage retreat probably needs more marriage counseling than we do. And I've just been so disappointed in the quality of teachers that have been doing these marriage classes. And I almost gave up. And then years ago, we went to a marriage retreat where you were running it, Steve, and I'm just a huge fan because you're real, you're authentic, you have great stories, you're a great teacher, you're humble. And we brought you in this past year and did another marriage retreat with you, and we're going to do it again probably next year with you. And I know the world knows you for your great book, Every Man's Battle, and the great books you write. But the person behind those books and the person behind all those retreats, Steve, you're just the real deal. And I love the fact you're so genuine and you're such a loving, caring person. And that's why I choose to always stay in touch with you. So keep up the great work.
Well, you too. And thanks for blessing all the folks that are watching and listening, and I hope our paths will cross really, really soon. So you guys, be encouraged. I mean, Tommy has spoken to so many people, helped so many folks, reached out to them, and is sought after by so many. And here we've got to hear his wisdom and all of it, every bit of it, realistic encouragement for you during the toughest of times. And I'll be right back here, every weekday, 5 o'clock, right here. And Tommy, thank you. God bless you, and my best to you. And can't wait for you to get back on the road.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. Thank you, Tommy.